38 Special versus 9mm in snub nose revolvers. So I'm going to do a test here to see if there's a big difference between 38 Special and 9mm in snub nose revolvers. So I have two 2-inch barreled revolvers here, my Taurus 605 and 357 Magnum, and my Taurus 905 and 9mm. Very comparable revolvers. They weigh almost exactly the same grips, all of that, both steel framed. So our 38 Special is a 125 grain jacket of hollow point, and this is a Nosler ASP, which stands for Assured Stopping Power. That's a 125 grain jacket of hollow point that is rated at 930 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel and 860 through a 2-inch barrel. They specifically list that. Our 9mm, that is a 124 grain, so 1 grain less. Nosler ASP, it's rated at 1150 feet per second. No barrel length listed, so that's a pretty common velocity rating here. So it should be interesting to see the difference between 38 Special and 9mm in snub nose revolvers. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. No fabric in the way that could potentially clog a hollow point or anything like that. And then I'm going to move on to doing a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of sweatshirt material on this first 3-inch piece that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4-inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh, so whatever you see in here is roughly a half as far as what it would go in a real living target, or should I say it's double the distance it'll go in this versus flesh. So if we see 18 inches, it means it probably would go about 9 inches in a real living target. So hopefully we can keep these bullets in these blocks without going through the back rib simulation. So we'll do a plain clear ballistic shot, then a real world simulation shot, and then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up, we'll run our 38 Special over the chronograph through our 2-inch snub here. This is specifically rated at 860 feet per second through a 2-inch barrel. So let's see how close we get to 860 out of my 2-inch Taurus 605 here. 812, 861, 875, 858, 868. So other than that first shot, not too bad, pretty close to its rating. Now with our 9mm here, you know, one of the things that can happen with 9mm is bullet creep out. It'll jump the crimp because they're not roll crimped the way a revolver cartridge is. A lot of ammo, if it's like law enforcement grade, it'll have sealant around the bullet that's meant to prevent bullet setback. That also works really well to prevent jumping the crimp. With rounds like this, it may not have that. So I did color one of these rounds with a black marker around the bullet and case mouth, and I'm going to check for bullet creep out with these. So we'll see if we get any bullet creep out. So let's see what we get here with our 9mm. It's rated at 1150. I doubt we'll get that, but let's see what we get here. 1005. 1005. 986. 995. I'm going single action because this revolver hasn't been shot a lot, so the trigger is kind of stiff for me. And surprisingly, we did not get bullet creep out. I actually see a lot of bullet creep out with a lot of rounds, but we did not get that with this. Another telltale sign would be if this last shot is significantly lower velocity, that would indicate bullet creep out too. And it did not, 1015. So just out of curiosity, I wonder what the velocity would be out of this Taurus G2C. Actually, if you look at where the back of the chamber lines up here with the back of the cylinder, there's actually more bullet travel with that revolver, despite them being about the same overall size. But you have cylinder gap with this, so we'll see if there's a big difference here. I'm going to run some from the semi-auto, see what kind of velocity we get with this. 1064. 1067, 1062, 1065, 165. So yeah, we are seeing at least 50 feet per second more with this. So the cylinder gap does play a little bit of part in that. So if I get terrible performance with the 9mm through the snub, I'll fire a shot with this through the gel, just to make up for that. But let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how 9mm compares to 38 special from Revolvers. All right, first up, our plain clear ballistics shot, no fabric in the way that could potentially clog a hollow point. This gives us the best potential to get some good hollow point expansion. So let's see what we get here with our 38 special. All right, now let's hit that with our 9mm. Let's go take a look. All right, so I tried to fire that 9mm a little bit lower to try to make sure that if this didn't perform well, that, you know, it would give me a space in there to fire through the semi-auto. But it honestly looks like it performed really well. With our 38, when I first looked at that, you can't see it now, but when I first looked at it, there's definitely a lot less expansion than with the 9mm there. Energy dump in this first 3-inch piece here, you know, just the initial impact. The extra velocity with the 9mm on top definitely dumps more, but the 38, you know, is no slouch. And if you look at the overall performance in plain gel here, there's not a huge difference other than the 9mm is expanded more. The 38 honestly has a bigger track right there, even though it expanded less, at least from what I could tell. So both are, I would say, are pretty comparable in their overall performance. So when we look at our 38 special, we got 14 3/4 inches of penetration. And with our 9mm, we got about, I'll give it 12 3/4. So, you know, a little bit more ideal penetration with the 38, a little bit more ideal expansion with the 9mm, but pretty comparable. So let's put on our fabric, put in our rib simulations, and see how these do in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of sweatshirt material, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. I like to keep these bullets within the back rib simulation. That means they likely won't over penetrate, but if they go about 3 inches past the back rib simulation, it's still acceptable, where I don't think it would pass through an average size individual from a front on shot. So let's see if we get here with our 38 special real world simulation. All right, now let's hit that with our 9mm real world simulation. Let's go take a look. All right, so we got some quote-unquote reliable jacket separation with that 9mm, but the penetration is about the same. First 3 inches, you know, it's hard to tell from this angle here. It almost looks like there's just a straight line with the 38, but actually from a different angle you can actually see that it's, you know, it's about that wide. And the 9mm is about the same, but it's horizontal, so it's hard to see it. But basically what I'm seeing is that the energy jump in the tracks, if you look at it close, is actually the same between, roughly the same between both of those. Maybe kind of hard to see, but maybe these different angles will show that a little bit better. 9mm on top there, 38. It's pretty similar overall. And we look at our rib simulation here. It does look like the 38 wanted to tumble a little bit. The 9mm a little bit less. That being said, these both stopped at about the same penetration. So I would say pretty comparable here. You know, the tracks are very similar. The 9mm is kind of bigger right in this little spot here where it shed its jacket. The 38 is just more consistent overall. I don't really see any expansion with the 38, and we went to about 13 inches. And then with our 9mm, it shed its jacket in the core also at 13 inches. So yeah, there's not a huge difference between the 9mm and the 38 Special with these nozzler bullets. Very, very similar performance. You know, some people might say, well, the 38's a lot more expensive. Maybe, but I mean, to me, it's not that big a deal just because I can reload 38 easier than I can 9mm, and that brings the cost down for me. I guess for an average person that don't reload, you know, 9mm might make sense to them, especially if they got other pistols chambered in it. So yeah, both are pretty similar. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at these bullets. Then I'll shoot our steel and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here is a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. Here is our 9mm, and here is our 38 Special here. So clearly, in plain gel, our 9mm did a lot better. And we had a lot better expansion and all of that. As where the 38 Special definitely struggled out of such a short barrel there. It just did not want to expand much at all. As where the 9mm did really well. Now when we look at the shot through our real world simulation, here's our 38. Basically no expansion, just some bullet deformation. And with our 9mm, we had some jacket expansion and a little bit of a lead core expansion here. So looking at this, yeah, you know, what I'm seeing here is likely the 38 tumbled and created more damage than what it should have. And it's probably wider than what that expanded hollow point is. The jacket is going that way. So ultimately what happened is you got pretty much similar performance. But the 9mm, I would say, performed a little bit better in this particular test because that little extra velocity helped it a little bit. So this is one of those things, like, I know a lot of people will hang their hats on this and be like, yep, I told you. But really, this is kind of like the worst ammo when it comes to just basic jacket hollow points. You know, it's hard to get those to expand at low velocities. So a lot of people will look at this old information and not look at like modern bullet designs and stuff like that, where you'll probably get a lot better performance. I mean, you actually do get a lot better performance with 38 Special through short barrels. I've seen a lot of good performance, especially when you go to a plus P. So looking at this, you know, a lot of people think that I'm like so obsessed with the 38 and I hate the 9mm because I always quote unquote talk bad about the 9mm. I really don't, because it was never my idea to really compare 9mm to other stuff. It was people obsessively telling me that 9mm is more powerful than 357 Magnum. It's twice as effective as 38 Special. It's this and it's that. And I started doing some testing on it and seeing that, you know, in the real world, what these people are saying is not really true. Sometimes 9mm does a little bit better than some cartridges, but I mean, a lot of times it's negligible. Like here, I would say it's negligible when it comes to the real world simulation, at least. And when I say stuff like that, people come back with that I'm delusional and I just like all this whole different thing that just doesn't make any sense, because that's not really where I'm coming from. I'm just testing ammo as fairly as possible and just telling what I see. And in this test, our 9mm did a little bit better than our 38 Special, but you know, it's obvious why, because there's kind of old school bullets. But interesting close-up look anyways. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, just my practical shootability drill here. So I want to get, you know, a front sight picture and pop off these rounds as fast as I think I can hit the target. Then I want to do a reload. And, you know, there's the big difference between 9mm using a moon clip, and these are TK custom moon clips, so they're pretty decent moon clips, versus a basic cheap HKS speed loader for the 38 Special. Two completely different options. A lot of people like the moon clips because they say they load faster for them than the speed loaders, but we'll just see how I do with both of these for just getting some shots on target and doing a reload. So I'm going to put my reload in my front right pocket here and just go from low ready and just kind of see how these will do, how long it takes for me to put 10 rounds on target. I don't have a timer or anything, but just overview here, see how this feels. So 38 special. So that's pretty normal for me. You know, just a basic feel for that. I'm so used to that whole system there of doing that. So now I'm going to switch over to the moon clip. I'm going to do the same thing here. See if there's a huge difference for me. So 9mm. So in this instance, I would say the moon clip was a little bit faster. There's been other times I've done it where the speed loader seems a little bit faster because the moon clip will kind of bind up for whatever reason, as where the speed loaders never do. So it's kind of one of those toss-ups. I don't think that one is necessarily faster than the other. I think they're very comparable. Now, you did see me miss some shots with the 9mm, and that has a lot to do with what you're seeing over the chronograph. You saw some shots go off the target. I've noticed that with basically every time I've shot a revolver that's chambered in a semi-auto cartridge, whether it's chambered in, you know, a different caliber that can also accept moon clips, or if it's straight up chambered for it. You know, Smith & Wesson Governor shooting 45 ACP in it, shooting 9mm in this, shooting 10mm in my Smith & Wesson Model 610. All of them shoot really, really high. And I really don't know why that is. It's just a consistent thing that where if you're taking a 38 and you're lining up your sights center, it's going to hit center. But if you shoot a 9mm revolver, 10mm revolver, 45 revolver, they're all going to hit like a couple feet high, even at this 14 yards. That's just an interesting thing. I don't necessarily know why that is, because it shouldn't be that way, specifically because like this 9mm revolver, it is chambered just for it. It is not an afterthought where it's like some other chambering. It actually has ledges in there, so that's the actual chambering of this. So it shouldn't be doing that, but it does. So interesting test overall. So here's the thing: a lot of people for a long time have told me they use 9mm in revolver, snub nose revolver, because it's significantly more effective than 38. Well, seeing this test, what we saw was, yeah, it has more energy, but practically it did exactly the same thing. The shootability was pretty much identical. I felt the same recoil between both. The penetration was about the same in the gel, you know, maybe a little more expansion with the 9mm, but I just don't see where the 9mm is significantly better than a 38. There's just a lot less hassle, in my opinion, with the 38 because you don't have to load the moon clips. It's just very basic. You can get a cheap speed loader. All seems to work pretty well. As we're with the 9mm, it's sometimes finicky a little bit. So that's what you get today. Very interesting test. So as always, comment, share, and like. And thanks for watching.